boys and girls. We are on chapter 19. So, the last thing that we read was Gerda showed Fritz the tunnel, and they climbed up the ladder into the basement. They pulled the boards closed, and they thought that they're never going to return there again. So, I'm really interested to see what happens in chapter 19. Here we go. The night before the last day of school was a long one. I wasn't sleeping well anyway because of all my excitement to begin summer break. So when I heard the sounds in the apartment next door, I easily woke up. Someone was crying in the neighboring apartment, but not just anyone. It was Herr Kraus. I couldn't understand that at first. Herr Kraus was a strong man who'd come through 2 world wars and hunger and the death of his wife. I couldn't have thought anything could affect him so greatly now. Maybe even though he had been released from his arrest, the Stasi had done something that was still torturing him. Because he was clearly crying, which made me hurt too. In the week before the wall went up, at almost the same time, he had warned my own family to leave. He had sent his children and their families across the border. If his wife had been well enough to travel, I knew he would have gone with them. Now he was alone, surrounded by a crowded apartment of assorted tools, car parts, and trinkets that would do nothing to comfort him. The crying bothered me enough that I got out of bed and walked into the kitchen for a drink of water. I was surprised to see Fritz there. Herr Kraus woke you up too? He asked. I nodded, and Fritz turned on the water tap and then a small radio that Mama kept on the counter. While it blared out some all-night dance music, he motioned for me to lean towards him. He whispered directly into my ear. He's done that every night since he came home. It was his crying that finally made me decide to swim the spree. I thought you weren't. I won't. You were right before about the risks of trying to escape that way. But I've been awake all night listening to Herr Kraus and wondering what happened to make him cry like that. Then I wondered that could become me or you or Mama one day. My mind was already made up to leave Gerda. I just wasn't sure about how. He drew in a breath and then said, Papa might not want us to dig, and Mama would never give us permission, but it doesn't matter anymore. We're going to build that tunnel. I felt so happy that I nearly cried out, but Fritz made some excuse to the microphones about the water not warming up, and maybe we could try in the morning instead. Then he winked at me and leaned closer to mouth the words, Tomorrow, maybe. It was a lucky thing that this was the last day of school because I barely heard anything my teacher said in class. We had some tests that I undoubtedly flunked, and in any other situation that could be a serious problem. But what did I care now? I couldn't be here when the next school year began. I wouldn't be here when the next school year began. The one detail I did have to pay attention to was Anna. As our relationship stood right now, I wouldn't get inside her apartment for a simple drink of water, much less the chance to see the death strip. But I hoped to plant the idea of maybe letting me visit one day soon. So at lunchtime, I sat next to her as casually as possible. Her mouth started to drop open and then pinch close. For the past 2 months, I'd eaten alone, just as she had. With my brother's arrest and her brother's death, we were equally tainted. While I picked up my sandwich, she began studying hers as if cheese and sauerkraut were suddenly too fascinating for her to be bothered with me. My plan was to act as if everything was normal between us. It wasn't so many weeks ago when I never have sat anywhere for lunch other than right beside Anna, and when she'd have saved the seat for me. Why not just pretend this was one of those days? I'm sure excited about summer, I said enthusiastically. Do you have any plans? Anna ignored me, or pretended to. I knew she was listening. I continued on. Mama left to take care of my grandmother, and Fritz isn't working, so he had a great idea. We found this patch of dirt that looks completely abandoned, and we might try planting a garden there. Neither of us know much about gardening, though. Do you? I didn't really wait for her to answer. There wasn't any point when she was still working so hard to pretend that I didn't exist. So I reached for my dessert, a fruit crumble that was actually quite good, and kept speaking while I ate it. The door patch isn't far from your apartment, just down an alley to the west. Maybe if I'm working one day and it gets too hot, I could come by for a glass of water. By this point, I was getting frustrated. Talking to Anna wasn't much different than talking to a stone, and I figured the stone would be friendlier. We'll plant corn, I think. Maybe some other stuff too, or whatever we can get seeds for. We're going to start on it today when school is over. We probably can't sell the harvest. I'm sure the state wouldn't allow that, but we could give it away. It's too bad we can't sell it. I bet our corn will be so good, so juicy and sweet that every family in Berlin will want some. We could make ourselves rich. Stop it! Anna slammed down her sandwich hard enough she nearly smashed it in her fist. She turned to me and hissed, "Why do you have to talk that way? Why do you have to think that way? You'll probably get in trouble for growing it, and even if you don't, why do you have to care about getting rich? I know you admire the West, Gerda, with all their rich people, but there are also many poor people too. Nobody has everything here, but at least everyone has something. Why can't that be enough for you?" I was so taken back by her words that I only sat there in shock. It wasn't things I longed for. What I wanted was far simpler and somehow much more complicated. I wanted books that weren't censored. I wanted to see places that were now only pictures in the smuggled magazines that had passed through my hands. Places like the canals of Venice or the beaches in the south of France, or maybe even one day the Statue of Liberty in the United States. I wanted a home without hidden microphones and friends and neighbors I could talk to without wondering if they would report me to the secret police. And I wanted control over my own life, the chance to succeed. Maybe I would fail, but if I did, it shouldn't be because some Stasi official holding my file had made that decision for me. None of that involved my interest in things, and I was angry with Anna for accusing me of caring about anything so trivial. If you don't want me to if you don't want the corn we grow, then that's fine, I said. I wouldn't share it with you now anyway. Then I stood up and marched away. Only then did I realize the strange irony in my words to her. Of course I wouldn't share our corn with her. I couldn't. There was only one reason for us to be on that land, and it had nothing to do with the garden.